Andrew Collins had always prided himself on control. In real estate, control was everything, knowing when to push, when to hold back, when to sweeten the deal, and when to walk away. It was a game of patience and perception, and he had mastered it. His career was at its peak, his name well known in elite circles, and now he was on the verge of closing the biggest deal of his life. A multi-million-dollar property sale to Victor Randolph, a venture capitalist with deep pockets and an insatiable appetite for acquisitions. This was the deal that would solidify Andrew's reputation as one of the top realtors in the city. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss new stories. If you enjoyed this one, leave a like, it really helps, and don't forget to share your thoughts in the comments. Let's discuss. For weeks, he had been meticulously working on negotiations, ensuring every detail was aligned perfectly. This wasn't just another sale, it was a defining moment, the kind of deal that turned successful professionals into legends in the industry. Randolph was the ideal client, rich, ambitious, and well-connected. Landing him meant securing more than just commission. It meant credibility, prestige, and leverage for future projects. Andrew had spent countless hours refining presentations, reviewing contracts, and coordinating inspections. Everything was falling into place. But as it turned out, control was something he was starting to lose, and not in the boardroom. At home, things had begun to shift in ways he couldn't ignore. At first, it had been small, insignificant changes. Lauren, his wife of 12 years, had always taken care of herself, but recently she had become almost obsessive about her appearance. He noticed how she started waking up earlier to apply her makeup, how she spent extra time in front of the mirror adjusting her hair. She had begun purchasing expensive perfumes, scents he had never smelled on her before. Her wardrobe changed, too. Lauren had always been stylish, but her outfits had become more daring, more polished. Dresses that clung to her in ways that demanded attention, stilettos that weren't exactly practical for everyday errands. She started carrying herself differently, more confident, more deliberate. There was an energy about her that was both alluring and unsettling. At first, Andrew had brushed it off as nothing. Maybe she was just evolving, refining herself. Maybe she was trying to reignite something in their marriage, though they had never had any major issues. Every marriage went through phases, after all. People changed, interests shifted. But then came the secrecy. Lauren had always been an open book, but now her phone was always close to her side. When it buzzed, she would glance at it quickly, sometimes turning away as if shielding the screen from him. If she was texting, she would tilt her body slightly, just enough so he couldn't casually glimpse at the conversation. He told himself it was nothing, just paranoia creeping in from working too much. But the feeling gnawed at him. The first real red flag appeared on a Wednesday evening. Lauren had been going out more often, citing girls' nights and last-minute plans with friends he rarely saw. That night, as she got ready to leave, Andrew leaned against the doorframe, watching her apply a shade of lipstick he couldn't remember her ever wearing before. It was deep red, bold, seductive, the kind of color that turned heads. "You're really getting into these girls' nights, huh?" he remarked, keeping his tone light. Lauren met his eyes through the mirror and smiled, but there was something forced about it. "Just trying to have some fun, that's all. You're always so busy with work." She turned back to her reflection, giving her hair one last adjustment before grabbing her purse. "Don't wait up." She kissed him on the cheek and was gone before he could reply. Andrew sat in the silence of their home, his fingers tapping against the armrest of the couch. Something about the way she said it, "Don't wait up," felt wrong. There was a finality to her tone, like she had already moved past the idea of coming home to him. His instincts, the same ones that made him an excellent negotiator, whispered that something wasn't adding up. He picked up his phone, scrolling through social media, looking for anything that might show where Lauren really was. But there was nothing. No posts, no tags, no casual check-ins from her friends. He exhaled, shaking off the paranoia. He wasn't going to be that guy. The insecure husband prying into his wife's life for no reason. But then came the message. It arrived 2 days later while he was reviewing paperwork at his office. A simple, anonymous text from an unknown number. "Check your wife's location. She's not where she says she is. His pulse quickened as he reread the words. His first instinct was to delete it, to ignore it as some kind of prank. But instead he hesitated. Without overthinking, he opened the location-sharing app on his phone. The one they had set up years ago for safety, something she had probably forgotten about. He expected to see her at the boutique hotel where she said she was having a spa day with friends. But she wasn't there. Instead, the dot on the screen placed her across town at a luxury high-rise, one of the properties he had shown Victor Randolph just last week. His body went rigid. It could be a coincidence. Maybe she was meeting someone else, maybe there was an explanation. But something deep inside him, something primal and undeniable, told him otherwise. His mind raced back to the little details, the secrecy, the new clothes, the sudden confidence in the way she carried herself. Slowly, the pieces started falling into place. His wife, the woman he had built a life with, was lying to him, and the man at the center of his biggest deal yet might be the reason why. Andrew put his phone down, his jaw tightening. His first instinct was to confront her, to call her and demand an explanation, but as quickly as the anger flared, he suppressed it. No, he wouldn't act impulsively. This wasn't just about his marriage. This was business. If he handled this wrong, he wouldn't just lose his wife. He could lose millions. He could lose everything. So instead, he did what he did best. He planned. Andrew sat in his office, staring at his phone, the screen still glowing with Lauren's location on the map. The longer he looked at it, the more real it became. She wasn't where she had said she would be. She hadn't even bothered to cover her tracks. He clenched his jaw, resisting the urge to call her and demand answers. That wasn't how this would play out. Emotion was dangerous. It led to reckless decisions, and reckless decisions led to losses. He had too much at stake to act without thinking. Instead, he did what he did best. He started gathering information. He started by completing a licensed survey to ask people what points they loved each other. Then later, he treated teams, approached. The first thing he did was check their shared bank account. Lauren had always been careful with money, never one to make extravagant purchases without discussing them first, but now there were transactions that raised alarms. A high-end boutique downtown, a luxury spa, a series of hotel charges that didn't align with any business trips or girls' weekends she had mentioned. Andrew clicked on each transaction, noting the dates. The pattern was clear. Every charge lined up with the nights she claimed to be out with friends. He leaned back in his chair, exhaling slowly. He had seen this kind of deception before, not in his personal life, but in business. Clients who tried to hide financial issues, partners who covered their real intentions behind layers of well-crafted excuses. The truth was always buried in the details, and right now, the details were telling him that his wife was living a double life. The next step was to gather undeniable proof. He needed more than just a gut feeling and suspicious bank statements. He needed something concrete, something that would leave no room for doubt or manipulation. That's when he thought of Linda. Linda Harper had been his assistant for 6 years. She was sharp, discreet, and fiercely loyal. If there was anyone he could trust, it was her. He picked up his phone and dialed her number. "Andrew?" Linda's voice came through almost instantly. "Everything okay?" He hesitated for only a second before answering. "I need your help with something, and I need you to keep it between us." There was a brief pause on the line, but when she spoke again, her tone was steady. "Of course. What's going on?" "I think Lauren is having an affair," he said flatly. "And I think it's with Victor Randolph." Linda inhaled sharply, but she didn't sound surprised. "I had a feeling something was off." Andrew frowned. "What do you mean?" She hesitated again, then sighed. "I wasn't sure if I should say anything, but I've seen them together a few times, at events. Nothing outright obvious, but the way they interacted, it didn't seem like just casual business. She was different around him." Andrew gripped his phone tighter. "How different?" Linda chose her words carefully. "More attentive, more engaged. Like she was trying to impress him, and he looked at her, the way men do when they know they have the upper hand. A cold rage settled in Andrew's chest. It wasn't just suspicion anymore. It wasn't just numbers on a bank statement. Other people had noticed. He had been blind while the world saw what was happening right in front of him. "I need proof," he said finally. "Real proof. Something undeniable." Linda didn't hesitate this time. "I can help with that." He exhaled, the weight of the conversation settling over him. "This has to stay between us." "It will," she assured him. "Just tell me what you need." Andrew spent the next hour laying out his plan. He needed photos, messages, anything that could confirm the affair beyond question. Linda, ever resourceful, suggested a private investigator. She even had a contact, a former police detective who specialized in discreet surveillance. By the next morning, Andrew had everything set in motion. The investigator was on retainer, tasked with following Lauren and Victor, documenting every meeting, every exchange. It wouldn't take long. They had grown careless, believing no one was watching. Days passed, and the tension in Andrew's home became unbearable. Lauren acted as if nothing had changed, moving through their routines with practiced ease. She still kissed him goodbye in the mornings, still sent him casual texts throughout the day, but at night she disappeared. Sometimes she had explanations: last-minute dinners, networking events, spontaneous outings with friends. Other times she simply said she was tired and needed space. Andrew played along. He smiled when he needed to, nodded at the right moments. He made sure not to give anything away. If Lauren suspected he was on to her, she didn't show it. She was either too confident or too distracted to notice. Then, on a Friday evening, the investigators sent him the first set of photos. Andrew sat in his car outside their home, staring at the images on his phone. Lauren and Victor at a restaurant, seated in a private booth, their bodies angled toward each other in a way that spoke of familiarity. Her hand on his arm, his fingers brushing against her wrist. In another photo, she was laughing, her head tilted back in a way Andrew hadn't seen in years. She looked alive, not like the wife who had grown distant, but like a woman completely captivated by the man sitting across from her. Then came the final picture, the one that confirmed everything. Lauren and Victor, standing outside the restaurant, his hand resting on the small of her back. A lingering moment before she turned toward him. Then, the unmistakable press of lips against lips. Andrew felt something inside him snap. There it was, the proof. The undeniable, unchangeable truth. His wife was sleeping with the man who held his career in his hands. And now, it was time to make them both pay. Andrew scrolled through the photos again, his grip tightening around his phone. He had expected this. He had known it deep down the moment he saw Lauren's location on that map, but seeing it in front of him, captured in undeniable clarity, ignited something cold and calculating inside him. There was no room for pain, not yet. He had spent his entire career negotiating, strategizing, anticipating the next move before anyone else saw it coming. This was no different. If he allowed anger to dictate his actions, he would lose, and Andrew Collins did not lose. He exhaled slowly and composed himself. There was still more to uncover. Infidelity was one thing, but he needed to know if there was something deeper at play. Was Lauren just indulging in a thrill, or was this something bigger, something planned? If Victor had been arrogant enough to sleep with the wife of the man handling his deal, who was to say he wasn't also manipulating the business side of things? Andrew refused to be blindsided twice. Over the next few days, he dug deeper. Linda helped him discreetly pull records, emails, financials, anything related to Victor's dealings with him. She even gained access to Lauren's work calendar, noting lunch meetings that conveniently coincided with Victor's known locations. The investigator provided more damning evidence. A hotel suite rented under an alias, charges on Victor's corporate card for expensive gifts, an intimate weekend trip disguised as a business retreat. It was more than just an affair. This wasn't impulsive, this was calculated. Lauren wasn't just cheating, she was positioning herself for something. Maybe she thought Victor was her future, that once the deal closed, she'd walk away from Andrew with half of everything, slipping effortlessly into a new life with a wealthier man. Maybe Victor had promised her that. The thought made Andrew's blood run cold. He had seen divorces ruin men, strip them of everything, leave them humiliated while the other party walked away victorious. He would not be one of those men. So he stopped waiting. The time for gathering evidence was over. Now it was time to use it. That evening, Lauren came home late. She was getting bolder now, no longer even bothering with excuses. She set her purse on the kitchen counter, stretching like she had just returned from a long, exhausting day, when in reality Andrew knew exactly where she had been. "You're home early," she remarked, her tone light, as if testing the waters. Andrew glanced up from his laptop where he had been pretending to work. "Yeah, needed a break." He paused, studying her. "How was your night?" Lauren hesitated for a fraction of a second. It was almost imperceptible, but Andrew caught it. "Fine," she said with a small smile. "Had dinner with the girls." He let the lie hang between them, let it settle into the air. Then he simply nodded. "Good." She seemed relieved, brushing past him toward the stairs. Andrew watched her go, his expression unreadable. She thought she had won. That was fine. Let her believe it a little longer. Because soon she would realize just how wrong she was. Andrew had always believed that revenge was best served cold. The moment he saw those photos, something inside him had clicked into place. Not rage, not devastation, but a sense of absolute clarity. This wasn't just about Lauren's betrayal or Victor's arrogance. It was about power, control. He had spent years perfecting the art of negotiation, reading people, understanding their weaknesses. Now, he would use every skill he had honed to dismantle the people who thought they had outplayed him. The first step was ensuring that Lauren and Victor never saw it coming. He continued playing his role, the devoted husband, the unsuspecting business partner. He let Lauren believe she had him wrapped around her finger, allowed Victor to think their deal was proceeding smoothly. He even let Linda leak carefully selected information about their progress to ensure Victor remained confident. Everything had to appear normal. Then he set the trap. Victor was throwing a high-profile networking event at one of his properties, a sleek, glass-walled penthouse overlooking the city. The guest list was exclusive, filled with investors, industry elites, and influential business leaders. It was the perfect setting. Lauren would be there, undoubtedly playing the role of the supportive wife while secretly basking in the thrill of her hidden affair. Victor would be there, arrogant as ever, believing he was celebrating his impending victory. And Andrew? He would be the architect of their downfall. In the days leading up to the event, he secured everything he needed. The investigator provided a neatly compiled portfolio of Lauren and Victor's indiscretions, photos, messages, hotel receipts. Linda helped him retrieve emails that outlined Victor's underhanded business tactics, deals that would make him a liability in the eyes of his investors. And then there was the final touch, an anonymous email sent to select guests teasing an unforgettable announcement that would take place at the event. The night of the party, Andrew arrived with calculated ease, dressed in his sharpest suit, exuding the confidence of a man in complete control. Lauren greeted him with a practiced smile, slipping her hand into his, as though they were the perfect couple. He played along, brushing a kiss against her cheek, watching as she exchanged a quick glance with Victor across the room. She thought she was untouchable. Victor thought he had already won. Andrew let them have their illusion for a little while longer. He mingled, shook hands, made casual conversation with investors and executives. He listened as Victor bragged about the upcoming deal, his voice dripping with satisfaction. Every time their eyes met, Andrew gave him a knowing smirk, as if they were partners in triumph rather than rivals on the verge of war. And then, when the room was buzzing with conversation, when the champagne was flowing and the air was thick with anticipation, he made his move. He stepped forward, raised his glass, and with a charismatic smile, commanded the room's attention. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his voice steady and deliberate. "Tonight is about celebrating success, about partnerships built on trust, on integrity, on vision. And I think it's only fitting that we take a moment to acknowledge one such partnership, one that has been months in the making, carefully orchestrated behind closed doors." He paused just long enough to let the words sink in. Victor straightened slightly, his ego feeding into the moment, convinced that Andrew was about to publicly validate their deal. Lauren, standing near the bar, tensed ever so slightly, as if some part of her sensed that something was off. Andrew smiled. Victor Randolph has been a force in this industry, a man who understands strategy, who knows how to take what he wants. And he certainly has taken a lot. A few quiet chuckles rippled through the crowd, investors nodding along, believing they were witnessing a typical exchange of business banter. But Andrew wasn't finished. In fact, he continued, Victor is so good at securing his assets that he's been working on more than just business deals. He's been expanding his portfolio in other ways. The room quieted. Victor's expression flickered, a split-second hesitation that Andrew caught immediately. Andrew pulled out his phone, tapped the screen, and behind him a massive screen lit up. Photos, text messages, records of secret rendezvous. Lauren, smiling in the glow of candlelit dinners with Victor. Lauren, slipping into luxury hotel lobbies. Lauren, tangled in intimate moments with the man who had been shaking hands with her husband only minutes ago. The gasps rippled through the crowd. Murmurs spread like wildfire. Someone let out a stunned curse. Lauren's face drained of color, her breath catching in her throat. Victor took a step forward, his jaw tightening, the confident businessman suddenly replaced by a man desperately searching for a way out. Andrew let the silence stretch, savoring the weight of their humiliation. Then, with the same cool, composed demeanor he had maintained from the start, he took a sip of his champagne, glanced at Victor, and smiled. "Now that," he said smoothly, "is what I call a hostile takeover." For a long moment, the room remained frozen. The images on the screen, undeniable and damning, held everyone's attention. The collective weight of realization settled over the crowd, thick and suffocating. Then, as if someone had pressed play on a paused scene, everything erupted at once. Murmurs turned into hushed conversations, some voices rising in shock, others in barely concealed amusement. A few people turned away awkwardly, not wanting to be caught openly reacting, while others whispered in disbelief. Lauren took a sharp breath, her lips parting as if to speak, but no words came out. Her hands trembled as she reached for her clutch, as if grasping at something solid would help her regain control. She glanced around frantically, her face contorted in panic. She wasn't just embarrassed, she was cornered. Victor, however, reacted differently. He stepped forward, his expression dark with fury, his carefully composed image cracking under the weight of exposure. "Andrew," he said, his voice low, measured, trying to contain his rage. "This is not the place for—" "Oh, I think it's exactly the place." Andrew cut in smoothly, tilting his head slightly. "You love an audience, don't you, Victor? You've built an entire career on selling an image, making people believe you're someone to be trusted. I figured I'd return the favor and show them the real you." Victor's jaw clenched, his fists tightening at his sides. The investors, the business elite he had spent years cultivating, were no longer looking at him with admiration. Some were staring at him with pity, others with disdain. A few had already pulled out their phones, no doubt texting or emailing their teams to reconsider any deals still on the table. Lauren, on the other hand, had finally found her voice, though it was shaky and desperate. "Andrew," she said, forcing a breathless laugh, her eyes darting around the room as if hoping someone would come to her defense. "This is ridiculous. You're making a scene over—" "A scene?" Andrew echoed, raising an eyebrow. "Lauren, this is more than a scene. This is an entire production. And you're the star." Her mouth opened, then closed. She knew there was no way to talk her way out of this. The evidence was overwhelming, the judgment in the room palpable. Victor, still clinging to whatever remained of his composure, exhaled sharply and straightened his jacket. "Fine," he said, his voice edged with forced control. "So you found out. You think this makes you look strong? You think humiliating your wife in front of all these people somehow makes you the better man?" Andrew smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Oh, Victor," he said, his voice calm, almost amused. "I'm not just humiliating you. I'm ending you." Victor blinked. "What?" Andrew slipped his hand into his pocket and pulled out a neatly folded document. "See, while you were busy playing house with my wife, I was doing some work of my own. I had a feeling a man like you wouldn't be satisfied with just personal betrayals. No, you'd take it a step further, wouldn't you? So I dug into your finances, your business dealings, and, well, let's just say you've been very creative with the numbers. A little too creative. Victor's face darkened. You don't know what you're talking about. Andrew unfolded the document, holding it up just enough for Victor to see. This is a full report detailing fraudulent transactions, hidden accounts, and regulatory violations that, if handed over to the right people, would not only cost you your business, but put you in a very uncomfortable legal position. I imagine the SEC would love to take a closer look at your books. Victor's confidence finally cracked. A flicker of real panic crossed his face. He lunged forward slightly, lowering his voice. You wouldn't. Andrew's smirk widened. I already did. Lauren turned to Victor, confusion and fear flashing in her eyes. What is he talking about? Victor didn't answer. He was too busy trying to process how things had spiraled so far out of his control. Andrew took a step closer, lowering his voice just enough so only Victor could hear. This deal, the one you thought was going to set you up for life, it's gone. The investors are pulling out. Your name is about to be dragged through every financial publication as a cautionary tale. By tomorrow, your empire will start to crumble, and when it does, I'll make sure you're buried beneath the rubble. Victor swallowed hard. You son of a... Andrew interrupted with a chuckle. Let's not get personal, this is just business. Victor's breathing was heavy now, his fury barely contained, but he knew there was nothing he could do. Andrew turned to Lauren, who was still staring at him, wide-eyed as if seeing him for the first time. As for you, he said, his tone devoid of emotion, you're free to do whatever you want, with whoever you want, but not with my money, not with my name, and certainly not with my dignity. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a sleek envelope, placing it on the table between them. Divorce papers, he said simply. I've already signed them. You'll find that you're walking away with exactly what you came into this marriage with, nothing. Lauren's breath hitched. Andrew, please, we can talk about this. There's nothing to talk about, he said coolly. You made your choice. Now you get to live with it. He turned, leaving her standing there, her face crumbling with realization. As he walked away, he could hear the murmurs spreading through the room, could feel the weight of the spectacle he had just orchestrated settling into place. Victor was finished. Lauren was exposed. And Andrew? Andrew had won. The morning after the event, Andrew woke up earlier than usual. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a soft golden light over the city skyline. He stood by the window of his new apartment, a place he had moved into weeks ago in preparation for this moment. The air smelled fresh, untouched by the weight of betrayal and deception that had once suffocated him. For the first time in what felt like forever, he breathed freely. The war was over, and he had won. He turned on the news, and as expected, the headlines were already tearing Victor apart. Financial analysts were picking apart the wreckage of Randolph Enterprises, their voices sharp, dissecting every scandal, every shady deal, every financial misstep. Investors had pulled out overnight. Lawsuits had already been filed, and the SEC had officially launched an investigation. Every major business outlet was covering it. Victor Randolph, once the untouchable mogul, was now nothing more than a cautionary tale. Andrew scrolled through his phone, barely suppressing a smirk as he skimmed through emails and text messages from associates. Some congratulated him subtly, others outright praised the way he had dismantled Victor without breaking a sweat. Even those who had once hesitated to align themselves with him now saw him as a man who could not be outmaneuvered. His reputation in the industry had not just survived this ordeal, it had strengthened. Lauren, on the other hand, had been trying to reach him since the moment she realized what had happened. The notifications on his phone were endless. Calls, voicemails, emails, desperate text messages, each one a variation of the same story. Andrew, please, we need to talk. I don't understand why you're doing this. It wasn't like that, I swear. Can we at least have a conversation? I made a mistake. Don't throw everything away over this. He didn't need to read more. It was predictable, pathetic even. Lauren had spent months lying to him, sneaking around behind his back, and now that everything had crumbled around her, she wanted to talk? She wasn't sorry for what she had done. She was sorry she had been caught. By the time she returned home that night, exhausted and humiliated from the fallout of the party, Andrew was already gone. There was no confrontation, no last words exchanged, just silence. The house was empty except for the neatly stacked divorce papers on the kitchen counter, waiting for her signature. She had lost him before she even had the chance to fight for him. Linda kept him informed on what happened next. Lauren hadn't taken it well. With Victor's finances in free fall, she had no safety net. The man she had bet her future on was now drowning in legal troubles, his accounts frozen, his assets under investigation. Whatever promises he had made to her, money, security, a life of luxury, had vanished overnight. She tried to delay the divorce, pleading with Andrew's lawyers for mediation, for a settlement, for something, but she found nothing but resistance. Andrew had prepared for this. His legal team was the best, and the prenup was airtight. There was no fight to be had. She would walk away with exactly what she came into the marriage with: nothing. Victor had bigger problems. His empire was collapsing faster than he could salvage it. Business partners abandoned him, clients severed ties. His name, once respected in elite financial circles, had become poison. Within days, he had gone from a power player to a liability, and no one wanted to be associated with him. Rumors swirled that he was on the verge of bankruptcy, that even his closest allies were distancing themselves to avoid the inevitable fallout. Andrew didn't need to intervene any further. Victor had built his empire on arrogance and deception, and now it was caving in on itself. All Andrew had done was shine a light on the cracks. For the first time in years, Andrew took a step back from work. He traveled, something he hadn't done since the early days of his career, when he still believed there was more to life than closing deals and climbing the corporate ladder. He visited cities he had only seen in magazines, ate in restaurants where no one knew his name, walked along foreign streets without an agenda or a schedule to keep. It was during one of these quiet evenings at a rooftop restaurant overlooking the ocean that Linda joined him for dinner. She had been his anchor through it all. Steady, reliable, never overstepping but always present. They talked for hours, not about work or strategy, but about life, about what came next, about the kind of future that had nothing to do with revenge or proving a point. He hadn't thought much about relationships, about trust, about love after everything that had happened. But sitting across from Linda, watching the candlelight flicker between them, he realized that maybe he wasn't as broken as he thought. Lauren had tried to take everything from him, his dignity, his success, his sense of self, but in the end, all she had done was set him free. Victor had tried to outmaneuver him, to use him as a stepping stone towards something greater, but all he had done was destroy himself. Andrew Collins had lost a wife, lost a business deal, lost the illusion of stability he had once clung to. But in the end, he had gained something far more valuable: freedom